Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. We're diving into the coffee market and how it's being affected by, well, some recent government policies.
Yeah, this should be interesting.
You guys have sent in some really fascinating articles, and I am so excited to dig into these with you. Like, did you know that even just grabbing a cup of coffee in Addis Ababa is, like, getting really expensive?
Oh, yeah.
Prices are going way up.
Yeah.
And even places like, Tomoka Coffee.
Oh, wow.
Which is like a total landmark, right?
Right.
It's been around since the 50s.
Ow.
Even they're starting to feel the pressure.
Yeah, this isn't just some, numbers on a spreadsheet kind of problem.
Right.
This is hitting real people. Like, from the coffee vendors you see, like, on the street corners.
Right.
Big businesses trying to just keep their doors open.
Yeah, and the articles you guys sent in, they highlight all those stories.
Yeah.
The struggling vendors, big established brands. We mentioned Tomoka. We've even got perspectives from economists and business owners trying to figure out what's going on. It's kind of like this chain reaction. And I think what we need to do is trace it, from the bean to the cup.
Totally.
And see how it's all connected.
It's kind of wild how something as simple as, like your morning cup of coffee can be this window into some much bigger, like, economic trends and challenges.
It's absolutely. And speaking of challenges, one of the articles you sent in talks about this coffee vendor, Fantuweldi, in Addis Ababa. She's having to raise her prices by like 25%.
Oh, wow.
Because the cost of beans has just gone through the roof.
Oh, that's rough.
She's even having to, turn customers away because they just can't afford their daily cup anymore.
That's got to be tough. Yeah. And it's not just her, unfortunately.
Right.
In Addis Ababa's main market, Mercado, the price of coffee has jumped like 20% in the last week alone.
Oh.
So we're talking low-grade coffee that's gone from 125 birr per kilo to 230, and the higher quality beans, those are now 1,100 birr per kilo.
Wow.
That's a 57% increase in just 3 months.
That's huge. Like, imagine if the price of your daily coffee suddenly went up that much.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Where coffee's, like, such a big part of their culture, right?
Totally, yeah.
They have one of the highest rates of coffee consumption in the world.
It's a staple.
So, what's going on? Like, why are these vendors being hit so hard?
Right.
Is it just a simple supply and demand problem?
It's more complicated than that.
Okay.
Remember the ECX, the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange we were talking about before?
Yeah.
That's where, like, most of the local vendors get their coffee, right?
And that's, like, the beans that aren't good enough to export.
Exactly, yeah. So those are usually, like, the ones that local vendors use. And then on top of that, there's this new market-based VAT system.
Okay.
It's from the Addis Ababa Revenues Bureau. And it's meant to stop businesses from underreporting their sales to, like, avoid paying taxes.
Okay, yeah.
The problem is it's causing so much confusion.
Oh,
A lot of businesses are being hit with penalties, even if they're trying to follow the rules.
Wow. So it's, like, causing more problems than it's solving?
Yeah, pretty much. And, like, just to make things even worse.
Oh, no.
The price of coffee at the ECX itself has more than doubled in the past year.
Really?
Yeah. So, like, last year, 17 kilos of washed coffee.
Okay.
That's, like, a specific type of processed coffee that costs, like, 3,700 birr.
Right.
Now it's over 8,000.
Jeez. That's a massive jump.
So, I mean, even before it gets to the vendors, coffee's already more expensive.
Yeah, no wonder they're struggling so much.
Yeah.
And even, like, the big names,
Right.
Tomoka Coffee, they're feeling the pressure, too.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
I mean, their bean prices have gone from, like, 3,000 birr to 11,000 birr in just a few months. And that's for, that same 17 kilos.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, it's kind of shocking that a company like Tomoka, that's so successful,
Right, yeah.
They're like an institution.
Yeah.
In Ethiopia.
Yeah.
Even they're having to adapt.
Yeah, it says a lot. It means that this is, like, impacting the entire coffee market, not just small vendors.
I read that they're trying to hold off on raising the price of, like, a cup of coffee for now.
Okay.
They're keeping it at 95 birr.
Wow.
But they've had to increase prices for their roasted and ground coffee, like the stuff you buy to take home.
Yeah.
By about 20%.
I guess they're trying to take on some of that cost themselves.
Yeah, but for how long can they do that, right?
Right.
And it's not just the beans.
No.
I mean, fuel prices are up, rent for their shops, wages for their employees, all that's up too.
So their costs are just going up from every direction. It's forcing them to get really creative to stay afloat. They're starting to sell like honey and black seed oil, even leather goods, just like anything they can to diversify their income.
Wow.
It really shows how businesses have to adapt when things are uncertain.
Yeah, it's like a microcosm of the whole Ethiopian economy.
Yeah.
Everyone is just trying to figure out how to deal with these sudden changes.
Exactly.
But what about the government? What are they saying about all this?
Yeah.
They must see how much this is hurting people, right?
Yeah, they are aware, and I mean, they have their explanations. Shafi Umar, he's the Deputy Director General of the Coffee and Tea Authority.
Okay.
He's pointing to seasonal fluctuations.
Okay.
So, like, there's often a gap between the old and new harvests in February and March.
Right.
And that leads to, like, a temporary shortage.
Okay, so that makes sense. Less supply, prices go up.
Right, exactly. But that's not all. He's also mentioned a decrease in contraband trade.
Okay.
So the government's been cracking down on the illegal coffee trade, and that's tightening supply even more.
Okay.
They've even got this new digital tracking system now to monitor the whole supply chain and stop smuggling.
It sounds like they're trying to, like, get more control over the market.
Oh, yeah. And they're also really emphasizing the success of, like, Ethiopia's export market.
Wait, exports?
Yeah.
But wouldn't that mean less coffee for people in Ethiopia?
Exactly.
Which would drive up prices even more.
Right, that's the problem.
Oh, okay.
They're planning to export almost 500,000 tons of coffee this year.
Wow.
And they've already made, like, over $1 billion in the past 7 months from coffee exports.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So while those exports are bringing in, like, much needed foreign currency,
right,
it's also contributing to the shortage at home.
So they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so we've talked about the vendors, the businesses, the government's point of view.
Yeah.
What about the farmers?
Right.
The ones who are actually growing the beans?
Yeah. How are they affected?
That's a great question. And it brings us to a whole other layer of this thing.
Yeah.
You know, the impact on farmers, it's kind of mixed.
Okay.
Like, some farmers are actually doing better because of these higher prices.
Okay, so it's not bad news for everybody.
Right, right. But you have to remember that land use is a big factor here.
Right.
Yeah. Like, a lot of land that could be used to grow coffee isn't being used.
Okay.
And then there's, like, the weather. You can't predict the weather.
Right.
So even if prices are good, some farmers might not benefit because of things they can't control.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, for example, the Oromia Agricultural Bureau, they're saying that productivity's gone up, so they're actually producing more coffee than before.
Okay.
But then you've got a farmer like Zeriun Hailu.
Okay.
He manages a farm in the same region.
Yeah.
His yields have been cut in half.
Oh, wow.
Because of too much rain and not enough workers.
So you could have one region with a really good harvest while another one struggles to even break even.
Wow. It kind of shows that there needs to be more, like, targeted support for farmers.
Yeah.
Depending on their specific situation.
Exactly. And it's not just about how much coffee they grow.
Right.
It's about the quality, too.
Right.
Some regions are known for, like, their high-quality beans. Those are the ones that are in demand for export.
Right. Which brings us back to that, like, tension between exports and the local supply.
Exactly.
If all the good beans are going overseas, that leaves less for people in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
And that drives up prices.
Exactly. It's a tough balance.
Yeah. This is really interesting stuff. I'm really curious to hear what the experts have to say about potential solutions.
Me too. Let's see what they think.
Okay, so we've talked about all the problems, but what about solutions? What can be done about this whole coffee crisis?
Well, the articles actually have some ideas from experts. One economist, Negus Semi, he's got a PhD from the Institute for Policy and Development, and he says promoting exports is good, you know, it helps to boost how much coffee is grown. But coffee takes a while to grow.
So you can't just, like, suddenly decide to grow a whole bunch more.
Right, exactly. It takes time. And, you know, the prices that farmers are getting for their coffee, it's going up, but not as fast as the prices on the, you know, the international market.
Oh, so it's like they're working harder but not really getting ahead?
Yeah, kind of. Negus thinks we need to grow more coffee, but he also says the way it is now, the people who have more money, they have an advantage, and it makes it tough for, like, smaller vendors to even compete.
So it's not just about growing more coffee, it's about making sure everyone can get it.
Right, especially local people. He's talking about diversification and making strategic changes, not just for big companies like Tomoka, but for the individual vendors, too. He thinks Ethiopia needs more control over, like, its own economic future, especially when they're dealing with these big international financial institutions.
So a little more independence could help.
Yeah, exactly. Another expert, Mustafa Abdallah, he's a business consultant, and he says the exchange rates, they're unpredictable, and that makes things even more complicated for vendors when they're trying to, like, figure out costs.
So it's like the goalposts are always moving.
Right, and he points out those supply shortages we talked about. They make it hard to set a wholesale price that's fair for both vendors and consumers.
It's that balance again.
Yeah, and then there's that big issue we keep coming back to, the government focusing on exports.
Bringing in money from other countries versus making sure that the people in Ethiopia have what they need.
Right. Mustafa says exports do bring in important foreign currency and can help farmers earn more, but at the same time, it means less coffee for people in Ethiopia, which pushes prices up.
So is there a way to balance those two things?
It's not easy, but remember, those government efforts to stop illegal coffee trading and that new digital tracking system, those are good steps. Trying to make things more transparent, and have more control over where the coffee's going.
And what about Tomoka trying to sell different products and not raise the price of a cup of coffee?
Right, they're adapting too. It's good that people are even talking about these issues. That's the first step to finding solutions.
It seems like we as consumers can do something too, right?
Oh, definitely. By making informed choices, supporting local vendors, and pushing for policies that make sure there's a stable supply of coffee in Ethiopia, we can help create a more sustainable and fair coffee market.
Okay, so we've gone deep into the coffee crisis, but it feels like there's more to it. It's like a window into bigger economic issues in Ethiopia.
You're right. Remember that problem with reliable data?
Yeah.
It's a big problem for the whole economy. Like, if the government doesn't have accurate information about things like how fast the population is growing or how many people are unemployed, they can't make effective policies.
Trying to build an economy without good data, it's like building a house without a blueprint.
Exactly. And then there's the problems with the banking sector, particularly in the Tigray regional state. They're still recovering from the war.
Oh, right.
Businesses are having a really tough time getting loans, even though the banks have plenty of money.
So the money's there, they just can't access it.
Right. It shows we need to focus on supporting small and medium-sized businesses. They're really important for any economy.
All these things are connected. The conflict, the economic recovery, access to money, even the price of coffee.
You got it.
Can we talk more about Tigray? It feels like they're dealing with even more on top of everything else.
Definitely. They're still struggling after the war, and getting back on their feet is so difficult.
The stories from business owners there, they're just heartbreaking.
It's a terrible situation. Imagine trying to rebuild your business with everything around you destroyed, you can't get a loan, and you're constantly worried about safety.
It's like they're trying to rebuild with their hands tied.
Yeah, a good way to put it. There's this business owner we talked about before, Moses Negu. His ranch was badly damaged during the war.
Right.
He's got all this interest building up on his loan, and he desperately needs more money to restart his business, but it's just obstacle after obstacle.
Even with some temporary help, it sounds like he's in a really tough spot.
Yeah. And there's a lot of frustration with the banks. Businesses feel like the banks aren't helping enough, even though they have a lot of deposits from the region.
It's like the money's right there, but they can't touch it.
Exactly. The TCCSA, the Tigray Chamber of Commerce and Sectoral Associations, they've been trying to raise awareness about this. They're asking the TIRA, the Tigray Interim Regional Administration, to reconsider those new tariffs.
Weren't those tariffs supposed to help them rebuild?
They were, but the TCCSA says they're actually hurting businesses that are already struggling. They're also asking the federal government for more help.
But it doesn't sound like anyone's listening.
Unfortunately, it seems that way. The president of the TCCSA, Barihu Haftu, he's been saying that even though there's been talk of temporary relief, a lot of municipalities are still enforcing those tariffs, which puts businesses in a really tough spot.
So they need money to rebuild, but the businesses that could generate that money are being squeezed.
Exactly. It shows how complicated it is to rebuild an economy after a conflict. It's not just about putting money into buildings and roads, it's about fixing the deeper problems that caused the conflict in the first place, like mistrust, economic inequality, and limited access to resources.
So it's about rebuilding trust and creating a fairer system.
Right. It takes everyone working together, the government, businesses, civil society, and the international community.
It's a good reminder that economic development is about people, not just numbers. It's about creating a society where everyone has a chance to thrive, not just survive.
Absolutely. Now let's change gears a little and talk about something new in Ethiopia. Sharia-compliant banking. It's still pretty new, but it's growing.
This is really interesting. I don't know much about it.
It's pretty fascinating. Zamzam Bank, they started a few years ago, and they're leading the way. They follow Islamic principles and offer financial services that don't involve interest.
That's so different from regular banking. How does that even work?
Instead of charging interest, they share profits and losses with their depositors. It's a system that appeals to a lot of people who aren't comfortable with traditional banking because of the interest.
So it's more like a partnership.
Yeah, you could say that. And they're doing really well. They just announced a profit of over 110 million birr, which is better than their competitors in the Sharia-compliant banking sector.
That's impressive, especially for a new bank. Sounds like there's a demand for this kind of banking in Ethiopia.
Definitely seems like it. Of course, they have challenges like any other bank. They have to manage a lot of deposits coming in, make sure they have enough cash on hand, and deal with rising costs.
So growing quickly while also staying stable.
Right. Plus, the regulations weren't really designed for this kind of banking, so everyone's learning as they go.
It's like they're pioneering something new.
They are. They've been opening more branches, investing in technology, and teaching people about Sharia-compliant banking.
Sounds like they're committed to this for the long term.
Yeah, I think so. Their success shows that there's space for new ideas in Ethiopia's financial system.
It's great to see that kind of innovation. We've covered so much: the coffee crisis, the data problems, rebuilding after the war, and now this new kind of banking. Ethiopia's economy is really complex, with challenges and opportunities.
It really is, and it's amazing how connected everything is.
And there aren't any simple solutions.
Nope.
It needs a lot of thought and a lot of different approaches.
But there's also a lot of resilience.
Yeah.
People, businesses, and institutions are finding ways to adapt and overcome these obstacles.
It's inspiring to see how people can adapt, even when things are tough. Like those coffee vendors, finding ways to stay open, or Tomoka trying new things to stay in business.
Yeah, and those businesses in Tigray trying to rebuild after the conflict. It's a long road, but they're determined to create a better future.
It makes you realize that economic progress isn't just about numbers going up. It's about creating a society where everyone has a chance to do well, where they have rights and their voices are heard.
Well said. And that brings us back to what individuals can do.
Right.
Even if it seems small, every effort to support ethical businesses, advocate for fair policies, or just stay informed about these issues helps to create a more just and equitable world.
So to our listeners out there, we hope this deep dive sparks your curiosity, gave you some stuff to think about. Remember, the best discoveries happen when we dig deep, we ask questions, and we really engage with the world around us.
You never know what you might find.
This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.